Today's material argues that public schools are failing because major teachers' unions prioritize political activism like marching on D.C. or transforming policing over student education. But we need to immediately jump into whether the foundational logic of that argument actually holds up.
Right, because the causal relationship between the political actions of teachers' unions and the academic failure of public schools requires much stronger evidentiary tissue.
Exactly. I mean, as I understand the notes, the source makes this case that public schools are in steep decline, right? Pointing to a UCLA student who lacks basic reading skills and falling international test scores.
Yeah, and then it just pivots to unions spending over $5 million on a national march. The material places poor academic outcomes right next to heavy political spending, assuming the listener will just automatically do the mental work to connect them.
So they are just juxtaposing two bad things.
Precisely. Simply stating that unions don't give a lick about education because they spend $5 million on a Trump march, it leaves a massive logical gap. It points out two separate issues without ever actually proving that one causes the other.
It relies heavily on proximity. It's like saying, it rained on Tuesday and I lost my keys on Tuesday, therefore the rain obviously stole my keys.
That is a perfect way to put it. The human brain loves to find patterns when two things sit next to each other. We are biologically hardwired to assume that if event A and event B are happening simultaneously, they must be, fundamentally linked.
But in a robust policy critique, relying on the audience's internal pattern matching is just incredibly risky. You are essentially asking the reader to finish your argument for you.
Exact. And relying on the reader's assumptions leaves the door wide open for skepticism. A neutral reader can effortlessly look at those two juxtaposed points and think, an organization is perfectly capable of being politically active while simultaneously caring about educational outcome.
Right. Those concepts are not inherently mutually exclusive.
No, they aren't. So by failing to actively connect the dots, the text inadvertently gives the reader permission to just dismiss the core thesis. When you leave logical gaps in persuasive writing, the reader's natural skepticism will always flood right into that empty space.
So the burden of proof rests entirely on the writer to shut that door. But my instinct here would be to just, add more data, like maybe list another 5 political marches, or throw in some more disastrous test scores to just overwhelm the reader.
Stacking more unconnected data points won't fix the underlying structural flaw. You explicitly bridge the gap by illustrating how prioritizing a national political agenda directly drains the resources, time, and focus needed for local classroom instruction.
Oh, so you have to demonstrate the zero-sum nature of union resources.
Exactly. Every organization has finite capital, finite man-hours, and, a finite bandwidth for organizational focus. You have to clearly articulate that $1 or a minute spent in one arena is intrinsically stolen from the other.
You have to reframe the political activism from being merely like an ideological annoyance into an active parasitic drain on the school system itself. If the union's leadership is spending their Monday morning strategizing a national rally, they are physically incapable of spending that Monday on curriculum reform.
Yes. So instead of just stating that the NEA is spending $5 million on a march and then jumping back to bad test scores, add a specific connecting thought.
What would that look like in the text?
Something like, that $5 million spent on a political march is $5 million not spent on literacy programs or teacher training. When union leadership focuses on organizing rallies, they are actively diverting time and money away from fixing the fact that kids are graduating without basic reading skill.
Wow, yeah. You take those two separate data points and force them to physically collide. The $5 million isn't just an abstract number anymore. It becomes the exact price tag of a failed literacy program.
Right. You make the abstract failure tangible.
But even if you build that flawless causal link, you instantly lose the audience's ear if you deliver that evidence using juvenile or toxic language. Looking at the rhetorical choices here, the authors deploy some incredibly extreme language.
Yeah, they really do.
They call the former NEA president a complete spaz, a crazy batch, and then they turn to the new president, Princess Moss, and make a point to mock her name. And then they actually use the R slur to describe people who share her views. It feels like bringing a sledgehammer to a debate when a scalpel would be far more effective.
Absolutely. The persuasive power of the core critique is currently overshadowed by highly alienating language and extreme personal attacks. Relying on slurs, Insulting physical voices like saying she screams all the time and mocking names completely distracts from the political critique.
It shifts the focus away from a valid policy debate and into a juvenile attack.
Exactly. This makes the argument sound less authoritative and gives ideological opponents an incredibly easy excuse to instantly dismiss the entire piece as toxic, rather than actually engaging with the problem of failing schools.
It is the definition of a self-inflicted wound. When you are writing commentary on a high-stakes, tragic issue, your most valuable currency is your authority as an objective synthesizer of the facts.
And the moment a reader encounters a middle school playground insult or a genuine slur, they intuitively downgrade your authority.
Right, they stop viewing you as an expert dissecting a crisis and start viewing you as like an internet troll venting personal grievances.
Opponents of this material will be absolutely thrilled to see those slurs. I mean, if I am tasked with defending the union's $5 million spending, that is hard to do. But if the author calls someone a crazy biatch, my job becomes effortless.
You don't have to defend the budget anymore?
Right. I can simply point to the slur, label the author as a toxic, unserious operative, and tell my audience we don't need to engage with the underlying argument. The writer has literally handed their opponents the keys to the exit.
They are inadvertently doing the opposition's PR work for them. I want to explore the psychology behind this choice, though, because audiences today often reward raw, unfiltered outrage. Is there a risk that if we strip out all this aggressive name-calling, we might accidentally neuter the entertainment value they're trying to cultivate?
Well, there is a massive difference between an entertaining, sharp critique and an ad hominem tantrum. If the author's sole objective is to just signal in-group loyalty to an audience that already agrees with them, then sure, name-calling is an efficient tool.
But that's not the goal here.
No. The stated goal of this piece is to definitively prove why public schools are failing and to persuade skeptics. Ad hominem attacks create an artificial ceiling on your reach. You sacrifice long-term credibility in exchange for a short-term, cheap reaction from your base.
So the challenge is maintaining that intense, palpable outrage because the frustration is justified, but weaponizing it effectively.
Right. Channel that genuine frustration into dismantling the ideas and public statements of the union leaders, letting the absurdity of their priorities do the heavy lifting for the argument.
The ideological misalignment itself should be the weapon.
Exactly. You do not need to attack a person's birth name when their actual policy platforms provide all the contrast you need.
And the material actually contains the perfect raw ingredient for this exact pivot. That quote they pulled from Princess Moss, where she demands a radical transformation of policing to address queer inequities?
Yes, that is exactly it. In the context of a labor union specifically designed to foster educational outcomes, demanding an overhaul of the national police apparatus is a wildly incongruous objective. The policy speaks for itself.
You do not need to add an insult to make that demand sound out of place.
Remove the slurs entirely. When quoting Princess Moss, instead of following it up with the R-slur, use a sharp, sarcastic pivot that recenters the argument.
How would you rewrite that?
Something like, Princess Moss is demanding a radical transformation of policing to address queer inequities. We're talking about high schoolers who literally cannot read. Which of these sounds like the actual job of an educators union?
Oh, wow. That takes the unfiltered anger and distills it into something completely surgical. The reader still acutely feels the author's disdain, but it's anchored entirely to a legitimate policy grievance.
Exactly. It elevates the material to a level where even someone who strongly supports the union has to pause and actually grapple with the logic of your critique.
Okay, so we've established how to weave a tight causal argument, and we've refined the rhetoric. The final piece of this critique is evaluating the pacing, specifically looking at how they handled the friction of commercial ad reads in the middle of incredibly heavy commentary.
The tonal whiplash, yes.
Yeah, because a text reaches this true emotional apex when discussing the systemic failure of these schools. They're saying these leaders are out of control. It's a very high-stakes, somber atmosphere. And then, without so much as a pause, the text just reads, "You guys, we have a new product to display for you from Cozy Earth," and pitches 40 by 70 luxury beach towels.
The abrupt transition from high-stakes political commentary to a luxury product endorsement creates a jarring tonal whiplash that undercuts the urgency of the educational crisis.
While I understand the commercial necessity of ads, doing this so abruptly feels like hitting a brick wall. What is the actual risk here?
By immediately jumping from the tragic failure of the public school system to raving about how thick and thirsty a beach towel is, the preceding outrage suddenly feels performative. It breaks the listener's immersion and minimizes the severity of the educational problem they just spent several minutes detailing.
My immediate instinct to solve this friction is simply to rip the ad read out of the middle altogether. Why not just put all the commercial reads at the very beginning of the material, before the emotional stakes are even established?
Moving the ad to the front is a blunt force solution that ignores the realities of content monetization. But more importantly, it ignores the fact that audiences are fully capable of navigating commercial breaks if the author manages the transition respectfully.
So the ad itself isn't the problem.
No, the issue is the total abandonment of the emotional environment. When an audience consumes commentary, they form a parasocial bond with the speaker. If you project deep fury and sorrow about systematic illiteracy, the audience adopts that fury.
It's an immersive psychological experience. You are asking them to care deeply, to invest their own energy.
And when you instantly drop that fury to excitedly pitch a discount code, you shattered that illusion of shared state. The audience experiences an immediate sense of emotional betrayal.
They are left wondering, wait, were you actually devastated by these failing schools? Or were you just manipulating my emotions to create a runway to sell me a towel?
Exactly. The suddenness of the pivot makes your core political passion look like a manufactured performance.
You're saying listeners understand that creators need to make a living, but what they don't tolerate is feeling like their genuine emotional reaction was just fodder for a sales funnel. So how do we navigate that transition without making the audience feel manipulated?
Acknowledge the shift in tone rather than ignoring. Create a palate cleanser transition that honors the heavy emotion of the preceding segment, gently bringing the listener down before pitching the product.
You're saying we need a transitional buffer to manage the psychological temperature of the room.
Yes, you have to actively decompress the emotional atmosphere. Instead of cutting straight to the product, insert a buffer. Like, the situation with these unions is incredibly frustrating, and honestly, if you're a parent, it's exhausting to watch. We all need a break from the political madness sometimes. So let's step away from the stress for just a second and talk about something that will actually relax you, like the new Cozy Earth beach towels.
That is an incredibly elegant mechanism. It doesn't insult the audience's intelligence by pretending the ad isn't happening. It actually weaponizes the heavy emotion to make the ad read more effective.
It validates the audience's emotional investment. You are saying, I know this topic is heavy. Let's take a collective breath. By honoring the weight of the political critique, you preserve your authenticity. The trust remains completely intact.
Which is the entire ballgame. If the audience doesn't trust your authenticity, nothing else will save your material. So, to wrap this up, let's quickly recap the 3 actionable takeaways for this critique.
Sounds good.
First, explicitly connect the causal dots between union political spending and failing classroom resources by demonstrating the zero-sum nature of their focus and budget.
Don't rely on proximity to do the work for you.
Right. Second, elevate the rhetoric by attacking the absurdity of the opposition's policies, rather than relying on slurs and personal insults.
Which just hand your opponents an easy excuse to dismiss your argument.
Exactly. And third, use transitional buffers to ease the listener from high-stress political topics into commercial breaks, acknowledging the shift in tone to preserve your authenticity. Apply them to the work and submit the revised version back for another critique.